Namaskaram, welcome, Vandanam, Swagatam. In this video, I want to highlight something very valuable, worthwhile that we may learn from or learn on account of Miss Sanju Varma, the redoubtable spokesperson of the BJP. She said in the course of a discussion with her customary aplomb that no matter what others think about Rahul Gandhi, no matter how Rahul Gandhi proves himself or does whatever, to us, he will forever remain Papu. Now, she said it with such absolute cocksureness and incomparable assertiveness that it began to ring many bells in my zone of thought. By now, of course, it should be clear to everyone who listens to me that I use every contemporary event, every twist and turn, mainly as food for thought. I'm not interested in gossip. I'm not interested in casual statements being strung together to constitute some kind of media entertainment. I only focus on those things which serve as the grist to the mill of my thinking. And I do so also keeping in mind the students of India, and it is my fervent hope and is my special concern that I include in my mission the duty to produce material that would be of use to young people, to students, particularly university and college going students, so that the main lacuna in our present system of education, which is that it is indifferent to the duty to promote the capacity to think in students, that is to some extent made up for. Now, here is a good example. Somebody says that irrespective of contrary evidence, or contrary evidence to which you attach whatever value you are pleased to us, Rahul Gandhi will remain what we said of him 20 years ago, namely that he is no more than a Papu, an intellectual dud, a good-for-nothing fellow, from whom nothing can be expected. Now, how would you, as somebody who does not have any partisan loyalties, one who is a fairly keen and intelligent observer of the national scenario, view this statement and this adamant, obstinate insistence that she and the party she represents will not change its outlook even by a tittle? Tittle is a tiny spot, not title, tittle, T-I-T-T-L-E, tittle. Their assumptions about Rahul Gandhi. How are we to understand this? Is there something that we need to understand this kind of adamant posturing that's showcased in public? Or is it something that's merely casual, which we need to gloss over? I belong to the category, or I am inclined to think that there is something we can learn from it, and it would be very interesting and worthwhile to do so. In fact, the clearest form of learning can be done and achieved by thinking through contemporary events which are very immediate to us, so that the knowledge that we gain therefrom becomes personal to us, and it has a certain degree of intimacy with our intellectual equipment, and therefore the knowledge that we thus gain becomes an active element of our intellectual life. And I very strongly recommend it to my young friends, in fact to all people. Now let's consider what we can learn from this experience. What is this label Papu all about? How would you describe this in the English language? Using what term? Papu is a stereotype. I'm going to be very slow and deliberately slow so that the thought process can be understood and, if necessary, critiqued, for which you need time. Now, the first proposition I make is that Papu is a stereotype. Now, I don't think this can be questioned because the BJP did not invent the concept of Papu. It pre-existed the attempt to denigrate Rahul Gandhi by sticking this label on him. So, BJP was simply using a pre-existing stereotype, stereotype, in order to stigmatize Rahul Gandhi and to alienate him from public sympathies, or to ensure that people do not take him seriously or develop any form of attachment to him. So, this stereotype was used lavishly, generously, frequently, in season and out of season, and we are quite familiar with that history. It does not have to be detailed. Now, the second thing to understand is, what is a stereotype? What, if any, is the problem with resorting to or depending on stereotypes? And to what extent does the present instance, namely the spokesperson of the BJP, saying that no matter what others say about Rahul Gandhi, no matter how others are inclined to look at him, for us he will always remain Papu. In other words, we will hold on to the stereotype that we stuck to Rahul Gandhi a long time back, and whatever has happened in the interregnum, that is the period between then and now, does not matter to at all. We simply refuse to consider it, and we will continue to repeat the old chorus and call him the same thing no matter what. So, this is actually the stand taken. That's very clear. Now, my submission is, and being a student of English literature and being somebody who tries to be particularly sensitive to the semantics of a language, I pay attention to word meanings in particular and try to be as accurate as I can in diction. Diction is how you choose and use words, how accurately, how appropriately, how sensitively, and with what subtle discrimination in connotations. Connotations are meanings. A word has got two dimensions, denotation and connotation. Now, light has the denotative value of a particular light, but it has many connotations. Light, enlightenment; light, that which reveals the beauty of something; light, the kind of beautiful expression on the face of a person. So, many evocations are there. Light also is a form of energy. Light brings out difference between truth and falsehood. So on and so forth. Many connotations are there. Now, so I try to be as accurate as I can and cultivate as much semantic accuracy as I possibly can, which is part of my discipline and duty as a student of the English language and as a student of any language for that matter. Now, what is a stereotype? A stereotype is a dogmatic assumption which may be either created for the particular purpose or it may be pre-existent. Now, in this present instance, it is a pre-existent stereotype, and therefore I'll stay focused on that and that alone. Now, a stereotype relates to a certain way of looking at the given person, situation, reality, phenomenon, whatever, not based on an open-minded or objective examination of the facts of the matter, but due entirely to a certain outlook on that person. Now, there are two types of stereotypes. There are positive stereotypes and there are negative stereotypes. For example, there is a positive stereotype that Brahmins are, as a caste, intellectual people, learned people, a people of knowledge, or noble people, or people who are of a spiritual inclination. These are all stereotypes. Therefore, if you call somebody a Brahmin, if you call a non-Brahmin a Brahmin, it will not be received as an insult or an attempt to denigrate that person. In fact, that person may feel somewhat flattered. If you call a person of a lower caste origin a de facto Brahmin, you are using a stereotype, a positive stereotype, in order to show some appreciation for him. Now, after having stuck the label of an intellectual Brahmin to, shall we say, a Dalit, if on a future occasion he shows some signs of stupidity, to the extent that you hold on to the stereotype, you will be absolutely unwilling to consider that evidence. This is the most important thing to know. Now, a stereotype of this kind is not something that originates in you. It is something that has originated before you. It is ready-made, it is available for you to use. And you can pick and choose between positive stereotypes and negative stereotypes depending on the person you are dealing with and the intention in dealing with that person. If you want to ridicule and denigrate a person, obviously you will look only for negative stereotypes, and quite obviously Papu is a flagrantly negative stereotype. Now, this stereotype, as I said, was not invented by the persons who began to use it in order to ridicule Rahul Gandhi. It pre-existed. It was created by some others. You don't have to have the imagination or creativity to invent this stereotype. It is there for you, ready-made, to take and use it as you wish. So that is what happened. But the point is this: once you stick a particular stereotype to a person whom you consider to be your adversary, and quite factually that is correct, then what happens is you become, for that very fact, incapable of examining emerging evidence in any degree of intellectual freedom. So long as you entertain that stereotype, so long as you believe in that stereotype, you feel obliged to overlook, deny, if possible, discredit, denigrate every evidence to the contrary. So much so, a person who entertains the stereotype that Rahul Gandhi is a Papu cannot but, and this is something that we must understand, it is not being done deliberately, it is done under duress, not forced by an external agency, but the force generated by one's own inner condition, to the extent that one has accepted voluntarily this stereotype. One has voluntarily aligned oneself, one's thinking, one's perception, one's outlook to that stereotype. One feels unfree, incapable, disallowed to examine emerging evidence to the contrary, or emerging evidence that would disturb the stereotype. If you don't understand this, you will not be able to understand this emphatic, assertive statement made by the BJP spokesperson that no matter what Rahul Gandhi does, no matter what merit he showcases, no matter how other people are inclined to think about him, no matter how many people are now gravitating towards him, no matter how much popularity is garnering day by day, and it's not being handed over to him on a platter, he's earning it by virtue of his personal merit and the sterling quality of the person that he is. All this can go on. You may pay some attention to it, but we will not, because we have to stay faithful to the stereotype that we embraced 20 years ago. Therefore, we are not free to examine any evidence to the contrary. So therefore, my friends, the pathos in being in this kind of predicament, and that's where my sadness as a teacher and a thinker lies. The moment you accept or imbibe stereotypes, you're compromising your freedom. Now, for a moment, let us move from politics and come to religion. More than the realm of politics, it's a sphere of religion that's full of stereotypes. But religion is compacted entirely of stereotypes, which is also the reason why every religion becomes highly intolerant when its stereotypes are questioned, because it goes with the dynamics and the logics of a stereotype that once it is accepted, every evidence to the contrary is compulsorily either excluded or denigrated. And therefore, if you try to engage a person who is laden with religious stereotypes in any kind of rational or reasonable dialogue, you're bound to hit the dead end in no time. And no matter what evidence you present to enable that person to come out of a state of slavery to the stereotypes, self-embraced slavery to stereotypes, that person will never come out. And for example, there is a stereotype that a Christian priest is morally superior to an ordinary person. It's a stereotype. And even if 1,000 pieces of evidence are mounted against it, the general run of Christians will only discredit the evidence and never look at the person concerned critically. On the other hand, there is a stereotype that women are weak, right? Every society, every religion, every culture says women are weak. And in such a context, if you really talk, very persuasively about the moral strengths that a particular woman exemplified in a certain context, you will try to explain that away in all kinds of ways. Oh, maybe, that's a casual thing. That cannot be said about women in general. Women are incapable of it, so on and so forth. There is a stereotype, for example, that Dalits are incapable of intellectual achievements. But what about a person like the late Narayan, who was the president, K.N.R. Narayanan, who was the president of India? Well, that's a very stray case. The fact of the matter is the Dalits have been kept suppressed and the opportunities for developing themselves via education denied to them for centuries, for millennia. And it is not that they are incapable, it's that their capabilities have been crippled, destroyed, ground to the dust. And therefore, if they are given appropriate opportunities, they will prove themselves as intelligent, as capable as anybody else. That's a fact. But the social stereotype that you entertain, namely that Dalits are intellectually inferior, unmeritorious, and therefore nothing much can be expected about it. And this is a stereotype that plays very seriously in the process of recruitment. And I faced it very, very strongly in my tenure as a principal of St. Stephen's College, when I decided to open up the college to candidates from the poorer sections of the society, and I was frontally accused that I was out to destroy the culture of educational excellence of the college. And I was portrayed, caricatured as an enemy of the college. Once a stereotype functions, it robs you of all freedom to examine, much less accept any evidence to the contrary. So I thought this particular instance, which would just come to the notice of everyone who listens to me, should enable us to attain some clarity on this important aspect in our public life. Almost everything in public life is a stereotype, and therefore, in dealing with these stereotypes, we must always remain aware of the fact that even as we have to encounter stereotypes, we have to also recognize that they are stereotypes and deal with them accordingly. Namely, do not surrender your thinking to the subjection of stereotypes. Retain your duty to think for yourself, duty to examine evidence fairly, justly, and without bias, and formulate your stand based on the free, educated processing of the data available to arrive at the truths to the extent that you can. Therefore, the opposite of stereotype is truth. You can't pursue truth if you remain a slave to stereotypes, because subjection to stereotypes shuts your mind, closes it against all possible changes thereafter. No change, no reformation, no correction of one's attitude or correction of one's own system, the system to which one belongs. Now, this will prove a very serious problem for the BJP in the days ahead, because time never remains the same. Change, as Lord Buddha said, is the order of the world and the order of life and nature. Everything will change. Now, if you become inflexible in this manner, if you fill your life and your thinking with stereotypes, then what happens is the world around you will change, but you will refuse to change, and therefore you will become anachronistic without your knowing it. All the while you will go on blaming the world around you, and you will try to find some villains here, there and everywhere. He's my enemy, he's the villain, he's the enemy of the country, he is a threat, he's prowling around as an anti-national element, so on and so forth. People don't realize that all these are delusions and illusions born out of one's slavery to stereotypes. Therefore, it's such an important issue, important phenomenon to understand. That's the reason why I thought it was worth our while to spend some 20-21 minutes to get some understanding, if possible a clear understanding of the intellectual and non-intellectual prejudices that play, or the dynamics that happen in this realm. So do not try to convince a BJP spokesperson or ideologue or camp follower that there is any merit in Rahul Gandhi. It is simply impossible, because they are not free, inwardly free, to examine the evidence that you present, the arguments that you marshal, and the attempts, the well-meaning attempts in your opinion, to help the person see the reality as it exists today, even for his or her own sake. All such attempts are sure to hit the dead end in no time. Well, that is sufficient for the time being, and if there is more to be said about it on a future occasion. Thank you, and all the very best.